This is Lama Tantrapa. Welcome to the second webinar of our Qigong coaching program and our apprenticeship. First of all, I want to thank you for your dedication to our program and our arts, and for your commitment to pursuing manifestation of your dreams, and also learning how to help other people manifest theirs. Now, as you have heard me many times saying that the art of manifesting and living your dreams is basically one of the ways to describe Qigong coaching. This is how I often introduce myself, or when people ask me, so who are you and what do you do? I say, well, this is what I do. I help people manifest and live their dreams. What are your dreams that you would like to manifest and live so that you would feel like you are living fully and you are living on purpose? Now, a lot of people, of course, say, wow, that sounds really exciting. I would love you to help me with manifesting my dreams. And we start a coaching relationship. Or some people say, that sounds like a dream job description. When they hear me saying that this is what I do for a living, they want to do that for a living too. That's potentially what you will be doing for a living as well. So this is one of the fun and exciting aspects of our work. First of all, introducing ourselves. And from the very get-go, we make it very clear what it is that we do, but we don't explain how. So often we receive the question, how do you do that? Oh, thanks for asking. That's a really good question. Now, sometimes we go into explanation, but usually I actually just start asking more questions. Well, before I answer your question about how I am going to help you manifest your dreams, I would like to know who you are and what your dreams are. Now, the first part of that question is actually not as easy to answer as some of you may think, because knowing who you are is already a major breakthrough for a lot of people. As you can imagine, not everybody knows who they really are, or they have some misconstrued sense of identity that is not who they really are. It's just a superfluous kind of mask that they wear. So sometimes people say, well, I'm a doctor, or I'm a massage therapist, or I'm a computer technician, or whatever people do. They may answer this question as though you ask them what they do for a living. So you ask them again, well, I wonder if you can dive a little deeper into who you are, not what your job is. And of course, in order for us to feel confident and comfortable asking this type of questions, we need to know who we are. In other words, we need to lead by example. We need to know ourselves who we are. Then we can help other people discover who they are and ask further questions. So, how do you find out who you are? Also, may be the key to helping other people find out who they are. Why? Because the process may be very similar, and the more you are in touch with your inner essence, with who you really are, the more likely it is for you to be able to help others. Imagine two icebergs floating on the surface of the ocean of life. The tips of the icebergs are just tiny representations of the entirety of what those icebergs are. You might have heard me mention this a lot of times. that we study how to connect with dream being. The dream being is the aspect of ourselves that we don't know much about. Basically, what you know about yourself and your life, it can be considered just a fraction of who you really are. It's just like the tip of the iceberg sticking above water, available or exposed to the light of consciousness. But that's just a small percentage point, maybe 5 or 10% of who you really are. So, in order to connect with who you really are, you need to connect with the deeper part of the iceberg that's in the water. And guess what? The deeper part of the iceberg is so much bigger than that little tip. Then, when this iceberg runs into another iceberg underwater, the tips may not even connect very well. But the deeper parts of those two icebergs already connect very well underwater, and that is exactly the reason why we learn how to connect with the deeper part of ourselves, because it allows us to connect with the deeper part of each and every person around us. That is a profound reason for self-coaching and self-discovery. That's right. If you are a coach, you most likely need a coach. You can coach yourself. You can also benefit from being coached by other people, such as me or other coaches. That's why we also coach each other in the context of our coaching clinics, so that we get more and more exposure to different varieties of coaching. And first of all, we benefit from the coaching questions that we receive. How do we benefit from the coaching questions? How can other people benefit from us asking them questions? Well, maybe you have heard of the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates. Now, Socrates was known for his Socratic dialogues, during which he did not lecture people about his philosophy, even though he was a profound philosopher. He was mostly asking other philosophers who were dialoguing with him, or his students who were studying with him. He was asking them about their philosophies. He was asking them about the meaning of life. He was asking them about their values. He was asking them profound questions, trying to find out what their philosophies were, first and foremost. And the fascinating thing about it is that often people would walk away with one or of two primary results. They would either discover that they didn't really know much about their own philosophy, and they couldn't explain it, and they couldn't answer the questions that Socrates asked them, or they walked away feeling really grateful for the questions because they helped elucidate and reveal a certain inner essence of their philosophies that perhaps they never got in touch with. This type of questioning is often the questions that we wish somebody would ask us, but nobody does. Even our best friends often don't ask us the right questions because they're not trained, because they don't have the tenacity to ask us the questions, because they don't have the time to ask the questions, especially to follow up with thoughtful and meaningful questions. And even if our friends receive some of our answers, often they don't know what to do with them. And they don't have the professionalism and dedication to keep us accountable as to whether or not we continue digging deeper and continue applying the understanding of these questions. If we actually discover the answers, then we would probably want to put them to good use. And one of the best ways to put our answers to good use is to start applying them to the manifestation of our dreams. Because essentially, many of these questions pertain to what are your dreams? who are you and what is it that you're dreaming of? And when we become aware of our dreams, and also we tap into the source of the dream, basically we awaken the dreamer within, the dream being that deeper part of ourselves that I had just mentioned is represented by the deeper part of the iceberg underwater, is essentially the part of our being that is responsible for dreaming up our dreams. When we dream something, usually these are not dreams that are produced at the superficial layer of consciousness. It's not something that we manifest or that we develop on the level of the tip of the iceberg. Our deepest dreams, as the name implies, come from the depth, from the deeper part of ourselves that we don't really know much about. If we are curious enough, we'll develop the interface between the tip of the iceberg and the deeper part of the iceberg. And we'll start learning as much as humanly possible about that deeper part of ourselves that is the source of our dreams. And it's also where the energy resources and most of our human potential can be found. That's right. Most of our human potential is not residing at the tip of the iceberg. It resides at the deeper part of the iceberg. That's why we call it potential. It's because it hasn't been actualized yet. So, in order to actualize it, we need to establish communication between the tip of the iceberg and the rest of it. We need the interface for that. And what's the interface that allows us to connect what we know about ourselves, the tip of the iceberg, with what we don't know? This interface is called awareness. In this case, it's self-awareness. Awareness is the capacity of consciousness to get to know that which used to be unknown. Well, that's exactly what we're working on. We're working on connecting with the unknown aspects of our being, tapping into our resources, discovering our potential, and revealing our dreams. That is all percolating through the filter of awareness. And so awareness is capable of filtering a lot of stuff. If we are not particularly careful or we're not mindful how aware we are or how much we cultivate the clear interface of that awareness, often a lot of stuff will get filtered out. It's based on our beliefs, it's based on our values, it's based on our bias. In other words, certain people have predilection to have a lot of bias that distorts and diminishes the communication between the tip of the iceberg and the rest of it. And the greater the distortion, the less person is self-aware. The greater the distortion, the less we are really in touch with our authentic dreams. So often people start pursuing somebody else's dreams because they were kind of spoon-fed to them as they were growing up, either by the parents or by teachers or by religion or by media or society at large. So essentially what we discover is that instead of pursuing our own authentic dreams, we sometimes end up pursuing somebody else's dreams, which never makes us happy. And even if we manifest them, our own dreams are still unmet and manifested. So essentially, that's the reason why so many people aren't happy, even when they achieve their goals. Why? Because goals, by and large, are not our authentic dreams. They are somebody else's dreams downloaded into our consciousness. That's why in Qigong coaching, we don't pursue goals. We learn to connect with the dreams and develop the skill in manifesting it. Also, I distinguish between our wants and our needs. And as you can imagine, wants are usually what people tend to pursue. And as we just recognize that often people pursue things that are not their authentic dreams, similarly, by pursuing the wants, they often end up uh, getting away from their needs. Or even if they get their wants met, if they manifest what they aspired to manifest, what they wanted to get, often they're still not happy. As they say, be careful what you wish for because you may actually get it. Why? Because our wants may actually be quite distinct from our needs. And when that's the case, even when we get what we wanted, we still have our needs not met. So, what do we do in that case? We need to transition from pursuing wants to pursuing our needs. And needs are often much more directly connected with our intrinsic values and dreams. So that's why in our process of coaching, we constantly remember to reorient ourselves, to be aware whether we're focusing on wants, and if that's the case, reorient ourselves towards our needs. When we work with other clients, with other people as clients, we do the same thing. We ask them about their wants. We want to know what they want. But then we want to dive deeper into their dreams, dig deeper into the reasons why they pursue these dreams to find out whether or not they're informed by their authentic values. In our next webinar, we'll actually discuss values in much greater detail. And you will see that there is a fantastic way to work with values. And you will also find out for yourself how important it is to be clear about your values. That clarity often comes not from adding more, but actually from removing extra. In other words, we often have lack of clarity because there's too much obscuration. And by obscuration, I mean too much stuff in our consciousness, in our mind, basically being populated with a lot of different, often conflicting values and beliefs and desires. And when they conflict, they create internal conflict and internal warfare, which takes a lot of energy and often leaves us without the energy necessary for pursuit of our dreams. No wonder often people don't pursue their dreams, or they try to, but they run out of steam very quickly, as is often the case with the New Year's resolutions. It's because they have too many conflicting values. Now, as I mentioned, we will have a separate webinar dedicated to values. But it's important to recognize that we focus on values. And we also want to be aware of how our coaching clients are aware of their values. So we ask them about their values. We talk to them about what's important to them in their lives. We also ask them simple questions. Why? Why is it that this is important to you? If the person cannot answer the question why, often they're unaware or disconnected from certain values that exist in their value system. That means that those values are not their authentic values. So we have a whole methodology for rediscovering authentic values and also clearing out stuff that doesn't really belong to our priority list, so to speak. Now, this particular webinar, as I promised, is going to focus even more on the characteristics of the right people for our coaching. That's right. We don't work with everyone, even though everyone might be able to benefit from working with us. We cannot work with everyone. We have to be somewhat selective. And the more selective we are, actually, the better. Because then the people who we end up working with are more likely to be our ideal clients, which means we enjoy working with them. We get the best results with them. They rave about their coaching with us. They also um, become really excited about going deeper. So they don't just coach with us for a few months and disappear. They actually stick with us for a long period of time and really benefit a great deal from working with us. So we want to work with people who are our ideal clients. And in order to find out who our ideal clients are, we need to ask questions. And we also need to know ourselves. Because if we know ourselves, then it's easy to find out how much we resonate with people. So our ideal clients are, by and large, people we resonate with. It's a lot harder to work with people who we don't resonate with. People who have something in common with us. And also people who have some degree of coachability. It's important to be coachable. If you are not coachable, the likelihood of you benefiting from receiving coaching is going to be rather slim, because uncoachable people are not open-minded. They cannot connect the dots, meaning recognize the cause and effect connections. They are incapable of developing strategies. They don't see the big picture. They get kind of lost in a perspective. They cannot shift perspective. So basically, they cannot dissociate, look at the big picture, and then reassociate back into the physical body, into their present moment. We will have a whole webinar dedicated to working with association and dissociation, which is a fascinating discipline or subject of study in and of itself. We'll also recognize that there is a certain degree of responsibility that the person is capable and willing to take for their lives. If the person is not willing to take responsibility for the results of their actions, if they're constantly blaming everyone for everything, or they just simply feel like they are a victim of being born at the wrong place at the wrong time, they usually are not particularly coachable. If a person is capable of taking responsibility, it also means that they're capable of becoming responsive rather than reactive. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not just reacting to the oncoming forces, not just fighting against everything and everyone that comes into the view, but actually responding to the stimuli that they experience, responding to the words and actions of other people, responding to the events in their lives, responding to themselves, to the fact that they are growing, the fact that they're getting older, the fact that they experience certain changes in their health or environment or relationships or financial status or anything else. And I would say the crucial aspect of coachability is also how capable a person is of learning. In other words, if the person is not capable of learning, they are not just a slow learner, they are not a learner, or they just refuse to even consider the possibility that whatever life presented to them is not a problem, it's a learning opportunity. Obviously, you can't really coach that person because they need a different kind of help. Maybe they need a therapist. Maybe they need somebody who will just take him by the hand and tell him what to do in each and every step along the way. As a coach, we are capable of providing a certain specific detailed instructions. But remember that coaching is not the same as teaching. And so we don't want to fall into the pitfall of misinterpreting our job description. We essentially recognize the value of coaching, and we don't want to devalue the coaching profession and what we have to offer by shifting into the teaching mode all the time. We also don't want to be fixing people, as therapists do. Now, once in a while, it's maybe helpful to provide certain therapeutic assistance, and it may be done in the context of coaching program. But we don't want to do this all the time. So we want our ideal coaching clients to be able to step into the learning state of consciousness. And in order to get into the learning state of consciousness, they need to recognize that whatever life presents to them, or at least in the present moment, is a learning opportunity. A learning state of consciousness is a very different state of consciousness from the state of consciousness associated with solving problems, trying to get rid of them, trying to run away from them, trying to pretend that they're not happening, or bitching and moaning and complaining about them. When we work with people, we need to be able to recognize how capable they are of being able to step into that learning state of consciousness. Sometimes we present ourselves as a role model, and sometimes we simply observe them and see how they respond to certain challenges. We also sometimes challenge them. That's right, we can challenge our coaching clients. It sounds almost counterintuitive, but it's actually very important to be able to challenge our coaching clients. Because when you do that, they actually are more motivated. If a person is a self-motivator, that is fantastic, and that would be an awesome ideal client, but there are few and far between the people who are really capable of being self-motivators. It's much likelier to find people who can get motivated, but they're not particularly self-motivators. Now, there are a lot more people who cannot get motivated. Obviously, they're not our ideal clients. And there is a fraction of population that are capable of motivating not only themselves, but also others. And coaches, ideally, would be among those few that are capable of not only motivating themselves, but also providing motivation to other people. That's why we get paid for our work, because there are few and far between this type of people. And so this is essentially an intrinsic aspect of our coaching modality, providing motivation, but also providing some challenge. How do we provide challenge? Well, I already mentioned that some of our questions can be challenging. We can also challenge people in terms of putting them to task, for example, to create their strategies, or asking them about whether or not they've done what they said they would do, which is also what we refer to as accountability. Often people will come up with brilliant designs or ideas or game plans, but they do not follow the steps. They don't follow through on their strategies. The best friend might ask them once in a blue moon, "So, buddy, did you do what you said you would do?" But these best friends are very few, and they're probably busy. So they don't really spend a consistent time checking on us to make sure that we stay accountable. That's another thing that the coach provides, accountability, which can be quite a challenge for a lot of people. And when people are challenged, it's important to be mindful of their edges of the comfort zone. You've already learned through your studies of Qigong about the principle of mindfulness of your edges of the comfort zone. For example, in the context of flexibility exploration, you don't want to stretch. You want to only shorten and then allow the muscles to lengthen. And once they lengthen to the point where you arrive to the edge of the comfort zone, you start moving along the edge. And the more time you spend moving along the edge or exploring what it's like to be on the edge, the more you get used to being on the edge, which means you actually become more and more comfortable being there. That means that your comfort zone actually expands. Well, the same happens with our coaching clients. We want to make sure that when we challenge them, we don't want to overdo this. We don't want to push them over the edge because they will be in pain and screaming and running away. Or they will just be overwhelmed and they will not be operating at peak capacity. The peak of their capacity is what we also refer to when we talk about being in the flow. So being in the flow is a very desirable and positive side effect of this method of finding the edges of the comfort zone. When we find our own edges, we can be in our own flow. When we help our coaching clients find their edges, they can operate in their flow. How do we find their edges? How do we bring their awareness to the edges of their comfort zone? We challenge them. We find out what's comfortable for them, and then we start deviating from that center of the comfort zone. We don't want to be just placating them and just being really nice all the time. We actually need to be somewhat diligent, professional. We don't want to be disciplinarian, nagging people or punishing them, but we want to make sure that we do not let them just be lackadaisical. By lackadaisical, I mean being kind of lazy and really comfortable, underwhelmed. In other words, they're deep within their comfort zone. The flow is easiest to feel when you're on the edge of your comfort zone. You're neither underwhelmed and lazy or bored, nor overwhelmed and struggling and suffering. You are in that sweet spot, in fine balance between underwhelmed and overwhelmed. You're not being too challenged. You're not being under challenged. You're not forcing yourself over the edge of the comfort zone, but you're not running away from the challenge either. So that basically is a real skill to develop, to maintain this kind of balance. That's why we work on ourselves first, so that we can work with other people using this principle. If you cannot apply it to yourself, it's not likely that you'll be able to apply it to others. Another thing that also happens is that we need to lead by example in terms of our own coachability. How responsive are we? If you are a very responsive person and you're not reacting, no matter whatever challenges your coaching client may present to you or observe you dealing with. None of those push your buttons too much. You don't get reactive. That creates a beautiful role model for your coaching clients to follow. And if they don't have a role model like that, and you cannot provide a role model of what they aspire to achieve, well, there is another approach. You ask them, do you know anybody who might serve as a role model for you who is not present in this room? It might be their parents or grandparents or some other ancestors or some elders that they knew, or perhaps people who are no longer alive. Maybe great people of the past. Maybe the great philosophers or gurus or thought leaders of the past. Maybe some heroes. Maybe some prophets. Maybe that person who served that role did not really stay in that role for very long, but at least they served that role for a particular moment that can be used by our coaching clients. How do we use that moment? We essentially look at that person from a point of view of the fly in a wall. The fly in a wall that could see that person in that moment. And this fly doesn't care about the appearance or what that person wears or how attractive that person is. Essentially, the fly in a wall does not care about appearance. It only pays attention to the inner essence. And the inner essence of all of us humans is essentially energy. And so the fly pays attention to the energy, specifically looking for the energy associated with that way of being. The way of being that provided the person the access to the resources or the capabilities that are specific to them in the role model capacity. If I happen to be in the capacity of a role model, I know how to look into my own energies and report to my coaching client, well, I had such and such energy. Sometimes I actually ask my coaching client, what energy do you perceive in me if I am your role model for whatever reason? And if it's not me, it's another person, that's wonderful. The best is actually when the coaching client is capable of being their own role model. In other words, once or more than once, they experienced being in that awesome state of consciousness, in that way of being that was associated with the skills or capabilities that they're looking for. If they're looking for some particular skills or capabilities that are not available in the present moment, it stands to reason to ask them, have you ever had access to those skills? Have you ever experienced those capabilities? Have you ever expressed yourself in the way that you would like to express? So in other words, maybe the dream already manifested at some point in time, and they would like to experience it again. Well, it's a lot easier to tap into certain resources that a person has already tapped in the past. We'll have a special webinar dedicated to working with energy resources. I'm just giving you a little glimpse into the methodology of Qigong coaching in general, and also explaining how to identify the right people to work with. Now, some people who are seeking coaching may be confused. They actually may be confusing you for a mentor or for a guru. Some people come to me and they say, I want you to be my mentor. I say, okay, it's not the same as coaching. I'm not going to be just coaching you through the process, I'm also going to be sharing my own experiences. It's an acceptable and sometimes very helpful role to play. But we want to make sure that we understand we are coaches first and foremost. Just like we can also provide certain therapeutic intervention if necessary, or provide certain teaching if needed. But we don't want to do this all the time. If a person comes to you for therapy and you are a therapist, well, then take the coaching hat off, put the therapist hat on, and provide the therapy. Sometimes you can switch coaching and therapy hats, even within the same therapy session. But it's important that we distinguish between therapy and coaching because coaching addresses the dreams that people want to pursue in the future, as opposed to therapy addresses the issues stemming from the past and that may be bugging the person in the present time. Even when we look at uh, distinctions between coaching and therapy, we also want to recognize that when people are constantly asking us for therapy, it's okay to refer them out because we want to maintain the coaching relationship. And the coaching relationship often will degrade if we are not actually coaching the person. If we're constantly trying to fix them, that means that there is certain unacceptance of that person. We also step into the role of someone who knows better than them what they need, and we are going to fix them. Now, you may feel that you know better than your coaching clients what they need, but that means that you're not operating in a coaching capacity, or in other words, you're not wearing the coaching hat. So it's important to remember that we want to constantly focus on helping the person maintain awareness of what they dream of and how they can manifest their dreams, not focusing on fixing some problems or um, pursuing certain lessons. Because if the lessons are to be pursued, well, that's an educational process. And there is teaching for that. If we are operating in a teaching capacity, usually it's very helpful, but it's not going to be the same as coaching simply because we're not helping a person create their own strategies and develop certain game plans and pursue step by step the manifestation of that plan. So, what we do is we help people manifest and live their dreams by supporting them and clarifying their visions. And clarity sometimes is, as I mentioned, obscured by conflicting values or some bias. So we sometimes need to help our coaching clients work through their values and often need to clarify or even remove some of the values that no longer serve them. Also, they need to be able to look at the bigger picture so that they don't get stuck in one particular perspective all the time. And we need to support them in becoming as responsible and responsive as possible. In a nutshell, that kind of gives you an idea of the job description and also certain specifics of the people who you are looking for. How do you tell apart who's coachable and who's not? You ask them questions. How do you deal with this type of challenges that life throws your way? How do you handle these relationship issues or these financial issues? Or you have a certain dream, what stops you from living it right now? Have you ever pursued this dream before? If you have been pursuing it, but you haven't manifested it, why not? What stopped you? How people respond to these type of questions will tell you how responsible they are for their own lives, how capable they're of learning certain new skills or whatever lessons that may be presented in their lives, how capable they are of being open-minded and available to change, which is another uh, aspect of coachability. If a person is not available to change, in other words, they're stuck in one sense of identity and they refuse to be anyhow different, probably they're not going to be a great coaching client for you. And the more you find yourself being coachable, the easier it becomes for you to also find clients that are coachable as well. Why? Because there is a certain law of attraction. You resonate with those people who are like you. So if you want to see a coachability in the world, to paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi, you need to be the coachability role model yourself. Be the change you want to see in the world, so to speak. You actually need to work on your own coachability. How? Self-coaching and receiving coaching from other people. The more coachable you are, the more benefits you will receive as a result of this coaching. But even if you're not particularly coachable, you can improve your coachability. So don't give up on yourself. Just like sometimes you also may see that the person is not completely uncoachable, but their coachability is kind of not at the high level. Well, sometimes you can also help them become more coachable. How? You can ask them, have you ever experienced more open-mindedness or more resilience and responsibility? Or have you ever been more capable of learning and growing than you are currently doing? If so, they can use themselves as a role model. If not, the next question would be, well, do you know anybody who could be a role model of coachability? Do you have any role model of somebody who actually proved to be capable of learning and growing, being open-minded, being responsible and responsive, and capable of tapping into their own internal resources that perhaps they didn't know before? If so, great. This person may be able to learn how to tap into that state of consciousness of coachability that somebody um, presented them with. Basically, the role model of coachability can actually help them become more coachable. But first and foremost, you have to be a role model of coachability yourself, and it's going to be your homework. Self-assessment. How coachable are you on a scale from 1 to 100? And I would even say break this assessment into 4 or 5 categories. How capable you are of learning quickly and without resistance. How responsive rather than reactive you are to challenges and issues that life presents to you. How capable are you of changing yourself and your sense of identity based on your learning and growth. How capable you are of changing your perspective on things. And also whether or not you have role models that would continue supporting you in your process of becoming more coachable yourself. So that's going to be one part of homework. And there's another part of homework that I would like to recommend is asking other people, your friends, your relatives, your neighbors, about what they dream of. And feel free to also reveal your own dreams. They may be not easy to talk about because you may feel shy or you may feel self conscious about revealing your own dreams. Well, guess what? Other people also may feel self conscious when you work with them as a coach. Learning how to overcome this is going to be a crucial aspect of your learning journey. Then see how you can either jot down on a piece of paper or in your journal or email me what it is that you've come up with, both in terms of your self assessment, in terms of coachability, and your ability to tap into your own dreaming. That will give us an opportunity to digging deeper into your values, into your visions, and also into your process of manifesting your dreams. On this note, I look forward to seeing you in our coaching sessions next week. Until then, have a wonderful time. Namaste.